A very good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon, ma'am.
So, how are you guys?
Good, ma'am.
Perfect. So, today I'm taking the topic which we had initiated yesterday related
Ma'am,
to
how are you?
data analytics. I'm good. I'm good. So, we'll be taking the topic which we discussed yesterday related to data analytics little further. So, today I'm going to discuss the time series analysis, and let's see how much we can gain. And today, for your convenience, I'm going to use some examples in Excel sheet, wherein I'll be showing you how to identify the seasonality in the time series, how to identify the moving averages. So small nitty-gritties I'm going to use of the basic tool to help you understand things in a better manner, and how descriptive statistics is done, how you are able to forecast the future, how you are able to extrapolate the demand in the next time horizon. So these will be the things that we will be discussing. The second topic of today shall be the decision making, and let's see how much we are able to complete today. So let's initiate today's discussion. So the first thing that comes to our mind of what actually is a time series. So time series is a set of data depending on the time, and it has a series of values over a period of time. I'll just let me join my writing pad so it will be easy for me to explain things to you in a better manner. Just a second. Okay, perfect. So when I talk about time series analysis, essentially what I'm doing, let's say on the x-axis, this is the time zones, and then on the y-axis, you're trying to identify the different demands in, let's say, this is 2002, 3, 4, and so on till, let's say, 2020, and different demands in different demand zones of different time frames is identified. And then sometimes what we do, we try to find the line of best fit in it. So again, we will be initiating or taking forward yesterday's discussion. So it's a series of values over a period of time, which is a collection of magnitudes belonging to different time periods of same variable, sub-variable, or composites of variables such as production of steel, per capita income, gross national income, price of tobacco, so on and so forth. I request kindly mute your mics because there's some kind of disturbances coming continuously. Okay. So in this case, time is acting as a device to set of common stable reference points. So as I said, on the x-axis, we are taking the time frame, and on the y-axis, we are taking whether it can be per capita income over the different periods of time. It can be demand over a period of time. It can be the pricing of different products over a period of time. And in this case, time surely acts as an independent variable to estimate the dependent variable of whatever you are trying to predict. So if I try to do the mathematical representation of the time series data, a time series is a set of observations taken at specified times, usually at equal intervals. And mathematically, if I try to present it, it comes out like y equal to, which is a function of time. Y is a function of time. So what is the different causes of variations in the time series data? It can be social customs, festivals, as you know, during festivals and the marriage seasons, etc. There is normally an increase in the demand, or you get a bonus. So it leads to an increase in the salary, or due to some change, like a seventh pay commission is coming. So in that case, there is a variation or reduction or increase in the incomes. Like Corona has brought in a change in the salary structure of people. Then it can be related to seasonality or seasons. Normally, a business has four phases: prosperity, decline, depression, and recovery, which we normally take into account when we are talking about the cyclic variations in the time series. And some variations in the time series can also happen due to some assignal causes like earthquake, epidemic, flood, drought, etc. And for sure, as political movements, changes, pandemic, and so on. So why you should read about the time series analysis? It's a very popular tool for business forecasting, and it gives us a understanding about the previous data. Yesterday we read about data analytics, and we understood that the data that is given to you, the data that has been given to you, you gain an understanding about the past, which you can go for identifying the reasons why this has happened, so that in future you can bring about an improvement. Why this has happened, then how we can avoid it, so that you can give some prescriptive ideas or some prescriptive solutions to avoid or enhance the good things. It can help in forecasting the future activities, planning for future operations, and for sure we'll be ready to evaluate the current accomplishment as we read yesterday. Some examples I have already given to you: number of accidents, fatalities, electric power consumptions, inflation, salary, stock prices, so on. So let's read about the different components of time series. The different components of time series can be secular, trend, or trend. So different components of time series will be secular, trend, or trend, seasonality, cyclic variations, and there might be some irregular variations or movements in the time series. So what are the secular trends or trend which are there in the time series? So the general tendency of the data to grow or decline over a long period of time. So you can have a growing trend like increase in mobile phones. You can have a decreasing trend like sale of alarm clocks. So there can be a growth or a decline over a long period of time. Again, as I said, this is the time zone, and this can be known as the demand. Hello? Yeah?
Yes.
So like population change, technological progress, improvement in business organization, better medical facilities. So all these are showing some kind of trend. And the forces which are constant over a long period, or even they vary, they do not vary, or they vary very gradually, they normally produce a trend, like formation of petroleum and formation of rocks. So you can have an upward trend, you can have a downward trend, or there can be a possibility where there is no trend. So why you want to measure the trend? As we studied yesterday, as we discussed yesterday, to know the information, to gather the information about the past behavior, the past data, which will help us in understanding that what kind of changes are happening, what and why they have happened. So estimating the reasons of the change, and for sure bringing in some prescriptive solutions, or giving some solutions to study of other components. So let's come to seasonal variations or fluctuations, wherein these are the components which are responsible for the regular rise or fall in the time series during a period of not more than 1 year. It might be repetitive, it might not be repetitive. So this fluctuation occurs in regular intervals, regular in a periodical manner. And this period can be a month, a week, a day, or even a fraction of the day or an hour. So that's the reason we have used the term seasonal. That is, it has some occurrence which is meant to include any kind of variation which is periodic in nature. And it is repeating cycle of relatively short duration, and it can be caused due to climate, weather conditions, custom traditions, habits, festivals. Characteristics and features of seasonal variations shall be regularity, fixed proportion, increase or decrease, easy forecast. This is not done. So what's the reason why you want to measure the seasonal variations? Because as we understood yesterday in the concept of data analysis, the first thing that you are collecting the data. Then you want to read the data. So that is the reason you want to measure the reasons for fluctuation in the data. It can be related to trend, it can be related to cyclic variations, it can be related to seasonality. So to analyze the past behavior of the series and to forecast the short-term fluctuations, that why they are happening. If you know the reason, that is why, how much, and then you predict, and on the basis of that you are prescribing. So the prescriptive analytics will come, which will be, can say, preceded by the reason and how much the fluctuations are. So the reason is you want to eliminate the seasonal variations for measuring the cyclic variation. Some examples of seasonal variations can be crops are sown and harvested at a certain time every year, and the demand for the labor growing up during sowing and harvesting season. So demand for woolen clothes is going up in winter, price increases during the festivals. Book banks in the beginning of the semester, people are taking books from the book bank or from the library or purchasing the books. The beginning of the, you can say, the school sessions, the rentals for flats is very high because at that time people take a changeover, or the number of letters which are posted will have a seasonal variation depending on the day of the week. So as I said, that cyclic variations are referred to recurrent variations in the time series, and these can be more than a year or less or more than a year. Sometimes it is happening like in 5 years, 10 years, as we see in share market, as we see in economy. And this represents a consistently recurring rise and decline. So it's following a cyclic trend. Something like this. It follows a cyclic trend. So most of the economic and business series related to income, investment, wages, production is showing this kind of tendency. And as you can see, it follows 4 phases: the prosperity, the decline, this is a depression, and this is the phase of recovery. This is the phase of recovery. This is the phase of depression. This is the phase of decline, and this is the phase of the prosperity. It is increasing, it reaches. So normally this follows 4 phases, the cyclic variation. And as we read in the initial slides, that sometimes you have some irregular variations also, which are called erratic, random, or accidental variations, which can happen something like if the machine is working and suddenly the tool breaks. So that is a irregular variation in the process. Let's say, I believe some of you must have read about statistical process control. In the statistical process control, you identify the random fluctuations and you identify the assignable causes. On the basis of some data that you have, the time series data you have over some period of time, you find the mean or the control limit, and using this control limit, depending on the kind of data that you have, whether you have an assignable data or whether you have a variable data, you find the upper control limit, you find the lower control limit, and whatever information you have about different pieces or the different production, you try to identify if it is following a cyclic trend, whether it is following some kind of variability, whether some pieces are going above and below the lower upper control limit and the lower control limit. And these are the points which are brought in by irregular variation. Irregular variation which are not, which can be assigned to some reason. So you need to identify. For example, let's say this might be caused due to failure of the machine or power cut. So, and suddenly the machine stops. So whatever process is there, it will stop there itself. So you might be facing some losses. So like strikes, fire, wars, famines, floods, earthquakes, production stoppages, unpredictable problems are there. So the characteristics of irregular demand, it is irregular, as the word says, unpredictable. It doesn't follow any definite pattern, and it is for a very short period of time, and it follows no statistical technique. But you can't say for sure that in the 5th week, this particular kind of failure will happen or this particular kind of calamity will happen. For example, if nobody could predict that about Corona, about COVID, nobody could predict about the kind of interaction that we are having today. Let's say 6 years prior to this, if somebody would have told me that I have to take all my sessions online, I have to interact with my students online, I would have said, no, this doesn't happen. It will be very difficult. But today, all the faculty members are taking their classes. So this was an unpredictable change which has happened. People are trying to predict about the first phase, the second phase, but and actually nobody can say. So some kind of happenings are there. So what you have to do, first you have to discover the variations in the time series. It can be a straight line, it can be with this doesn't follow any variation. It can have a cyclic variation, it can have a seasonality variation with an increasing trend. Now this is a seasonality variation with an increasing trend. It can have a reducing trend. So you first to discover the kind of data it is showing, how it is flowing across the different time frames, how it is flowing across the different time frames, the data, whether it's showing an increasing trend, a reducing trend, a cyclic variation. Then you measure that. Then you try to isolate certain points which cannot fall under, you can say, some random reasons. So that reason that you have, so you have to isolate that cause, and then you will be trying to identify the reason for that. And through that, what you have to do first, you will be breaking down the components of the time series as cyclic, trend, irregular, seasonality. So you will be breaking down into different components of the time series. So if I draw the mathematical model of the time series, we normally use two kinds of models, an additive model and a multiplicative model, wherein you are calculating the trend, the seasonality, and the cyclic variations of the, and when you add these components, when they add these components, they become, it becomes an additive component. And if so, this is going to be a normal curve. This is without any trend, no seasonality. Then you add cyclic variations to it, you add seasonality to it, you add trend to it. So it becomes the sum of the total components, which is through which you can forecast the future. You can forecast the future. So you can either multiply them using the multiplicative model, or you can add them using the additive model. And in case in additive model, if some component is absent, you put it as 0. In multiplicative model, if some component is absent, you put it as 1. So then I'll be the last part, the seasonal factor of multiplicative model is the proportion ratio of the trends. And thus the magnitude of seasonality swings increases or decreases according to the behavior of the trend. So I'll be The last part of both, I will be taking in detail and I will be explaining it through an Excel sheet. So how to forecast the past data, and that too objectively. So what we can do, we can leverage the past data to come up with a forecast. So there are two primary methods. One is the causal method, and other is the time series method. In the causal models, we identify the demand D. We may use again the same linear regression line, that is y equal to a plus bx. The time we can use it, wherein this is the independent variable, this is the dependent variable which we read yesterday. So if D is the demand or future outcome to be predicted or to be forecasted, we assume that there are n variables or root causes that influence the demand. A causal method is one in which demand is formulated as a theoretical function of all these n causes. So you can have a single regression technique or you have a multiple regression technique you can use, identifying all the reasons which are causing the variation in the demand. And normally, as we saw yesterday in the regression method, it is generally intricate and complex, and it needs advanced tools in addition to domain expertise, which we read in detail yesterday. But today's discussion, we are going to focus mainly on time series based models. So the time series models, again, I reiterate, it's just collection of past values of the variable which is being predicted, and it can be considered as a naive method. Goal is to isolate the patterns in the past data, and past data might have characteristics such as trend, seasonality, randomness. So I can show you some data. Just a second, I'll show you some data. Now this is the data wherein which is having, this is the data for around 111 years for the visitors in a zoo. And using that data, you can identify the trend, you can identify the seasonality, and how it is done. Let me show you. Now, these are the 100 periods data that I have, and these are the different demands that I have. So let's say I want to draw this particular on a graph. So redraw this. Let's say I want to know, draw this particular demand over the time horizon. I have 100 years data or 100 time periods data. I won't say years, it's time periods data for the demand for these 100 time horizons. So now I want to represent it in form of a graph. Okay, so let me insert the data in this. Now this is my data. My series name is demand and my series values are these. I'm showing a very, very basic thing, and many of you might be already aware about these things. So here you can see this particular chart has come, and I can change its color, whatever I want to do, I can do it. I want to change the color. I want to turn it into black. That can also be done. I think that's just playing around with the. Here you can see I have. So whatever you want to do, you can do the changes in the data. I can color everything. The markers can also be changed. So these things I think you guys can do. It's not a big deal. Okay. I can put it as the, give some title to it. 100 period demand data. Some, if you want, I can give the I can give axis title also. This is the demand. The name of this axis can be, oops. So this has so this way I can identify how this is varying. You want to, so I think that's easy peasy, not a big deal. So this way you can see now you have got some data and you have drawn it, and now you can see there are some seasonality parameters. There are some, these are some seasonality factors are there here. There are some trends are there. It is having a single, it doesn't follow any kind of trend. It's a very, you can say, basic data with no trend, but some variation, some seasonalities associated with it. We'll try to decipher what it is in the later part of our discussions. So this is the data that I have. I have even found the average of these data. How you can find the average? Just type average and this is your average that you have got. You want to know the standard deviation of this data. You can very easily know the standard deviation of this data. So these are some basic things which you can see. Now this is the standard deviation of the data. So coming back to our discussion. Are my slides visible? Hello, are my slides visible? Hello? Hello? Are my slides visible? Anybody? Hello? Hello? Yeah, are my slides visible? Hello?
Yes, visible on slide.
Perfect. So please, in case I ask some question, please reply so that I don't need to. So this again, I have pasted the graph which we saw in the previous slide. So now we identified the sample means or the sample averages. I had shown you how to go about it, and this we calculated using the average function, and we also calculated the standard deviation of the complete data. So I think there is no confusion in that. So I've also given the equations for the sample standard deviation and the sample standard mean. But in Excel sheet, I found it using in a very easy manner by simply putting as equal to standard deviation, the bracket, the complete data, and simply for the average also in the similar manner we found. So now this was the stationary data. It wasn't showing any trend behavior. So this is something like whatever is going to happen in the future will be resembling the past. So this was the data which I had used, which shows no perceptible trend in there. So a stationary time series will be having the form as mu plus eta. That is the error component. So we'll also try to find the error component, different error components which are there in our data, which we will be using the moving average method, which is a forecasting technique, wherein you don't collect the complete data. You are only finding the data which is relevant for you. Now, if you see the data that you have, this is 100 years data or 100 periods data, but this complete data might not be relevant. So what you do, you try to identify till what time frame the data is. Now you see, if you divide it into two parts, now this is showing lots of changes, but here it is following some semblance. So that is the reason we'll say, okay, this particular data I'm going to decipher using some forecasting technique. That is, so I will be using the moving average method, not the exponential smoothing method, which in case needed, we can discuss later. So how it is done? This we do use using predictive analytics, which is finding the mean for the prediction, descriptive sample means, and in other words, how you go about it. So let's go for identifying the predictions and the errors for the different periods. Is my graph visible? Is my Excel sheet visible to you? Hello?
No, ma'am.
Is my
All PPT visible. Predictive analysis.
okay? So again and again, what I'll have to do again, I have to redo things. Okay, no problem. I can manage it. So now my Excel sheet is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Perfect. So this, if you want, I can again find the average. So I'll do it somewhere else. This graph also I'll put somewhere else so that it doesn't disturb our work. Okay, so it's fine. So now try to find the average. First, we'll try to find the average of the complete data, which was, this is, and standard deviation of the complete data I'll calculate. So this is equal to average here. You see, you have got some value. Again, let's try to find the standard deviation of the data. You have found the standard deviation of the data. You don't need so many zeros, so you can put it as 3 decimal places, or you can put it as 2 decimal places. It's totally on you. You have found the standard deviation. Now, as I said that there is a possibility you are not much interested in the complete 100 periods data. So what we can do, let's say we want to know the variations, or we want to know how it is varying till the 80th period. So I want to know From the 81st period, I'll try to find the average. So what I do, I've tried to look for the and I'm going to consider since it's a moving average with last 10 periods data. So from 80 till only 71. So as you can see, this is 10 period data. I'll find the average. Then I'll try to find the errors little later. Similarly, I can find the average for now each. If you see, this is considering only the 10 periods data, not more than that. So for 81st period, what I have done, I have taken the previous 10 periods data from 71 to 80. It's a, as you can see, this is a 10 period data. Similarly, what I can do, I can find the moving average for a 20 period data. So if I again want to find the moving average for the 81st period, I'm considering only the latest 20 period average. So this will be the previous 20 periods data I can take. So this will go up till 61. So here you can see I have found the moving average for 20 years data, and the similar manner I can find for rest from 81 to 100, that is 20 years. I have found the moving averages. Now you see, this is the forecast and this is the actual demand. This is the forecast. 55.8 is the forecast you have identified using the moving average method, and this is the actual demand. So surely there is going to be an error in this particular technique. So what we do, we try to use the moving average method wherein we are using the are my slides visible? Is my Excel sheet visible? Is my Excel sheet visible? Hello? Yeah, is my Excel sheet visible? Is my Excel sheet visible? Hello? So I try to find the error. So my error shall be so this is the error that I have identified. The different kinds of errors. Now here you see there are some positives and there are some negatives in this. So what I do, I'll put it as an absolute value of so I have changed the positives to negative. I have only considered the absolute values. Now there are three kinds of errors that we shall be considering. We will be using the mean absolute deviation, the mean squared errors, and the mean absolute percentage deviation. For that, I need to have the square of the errors. So the square of the errors shall be so what actually I'm doing the descriptive analytics. I'm trying to read the data, what the data says. Now this is stable data, it doesn't follow any trend, any. So now the next part shall be the squared, and then it is the variation, mean absolute percentage deviation. So this shall be so I can Either number, reduce the number of decimals, or let's keep it till for some time being. So these are the mean absolute deviations. So mean absolute deviation, what's going to be the mean absolute deviation? This is going to be average of the 20 years data. Then mean square error shall be again for the 20 years data, and mean absolute percentage deviation shall be for the 20 years data. I want to you can reduce the number of. So this is the mean absolute percentage deviation. I can put it in decimals also. So this is the mean absolute percentage deviation in percentage. The average for 10 period data shall be and the standard deviation for again for 10 period data twenty period data from 81 to 'So this is the standard deviation. Similarly, you can find it for the 20 periods also. Now, somebody might ask me that what is this essence of mean this moving average for 10 periods, moving average of 20 periods. The essence is that you are utilizing the previous 10 periods data to find the forecast for the 11th period. You are using the actual demand, the data that you have for the previous 10 periods to, now these are the 10 periods. You're trying to forecast the demand for the 11th period using the previous 10 periods data, or you're trying to forecast the demand for the 21st period using the previous 20 years or 20 periods data. So what is the essence? As you see here, the average is coming as 55.8 and it is going to be 55.5. Now it's on the researcher to identify whether you want to go for moving average of 10 periods or you want to go for moving average of 20 periods. And this will be deciphered using looking at the data. Because you know, law of averages says that if you want to know the average of 0 and 10, it is 5, and the average of 4 and 6 is also 5. So if I'm taking the average, it is actually nullifying the impact of the data which is closer to the mean. So it's totally on you how much variation is there in the data. On the basis of that, you choose the moving average period, 10, 20, 13, 15, whatever you want to choose. And exactly using that moving average, you can find the different kinds of errors, the moving average, the mean absolute deviation, the mean squared error, and the mean absolute percentage deviation in the data. So now, like, coming back again to our slides. So we can use the statistics calculated for prediction of the forecasting. So now, whatever we did, how many of some of you might be aware about the central limit theorem? Yes or no? So in that case, when the data is the first assumption is that the data is normally distributed. The data is normally distributed. So when the data is normally distributed, the mean shall be taken as it is. That is, the mean that you have identified shall be equal to the mean of the samples. But in case of the standard deviation, it shall be the standard deviation that we identified, that was 13 point something, and you add an error component of S upon the number of data that you have taken. So how to go about it? As we know, for n 10 or n 20 data points, and we presume that the data is normally distributed, the mean for prediction came as 49.6 and 51.95, as we saw, and the standard deviation of prediction was changed. So how it got changed? I'll again, if you see the data, it was 9.62. It was 9.62. So if you add that to the value, it come as 13.53. And for 20, it shall come as 11.77, the value of standard deviation, wherein you use this is 9 point, just again, let me see, it is 9.62. So 9.62 plus so let me calculate that, how much it comes. This is 9.62 divided by root of 10. So this has come as 3.042. So again, if I add, how much it has come? So this comes as 9.62 plus 3.042. So this comes as, sorry, I've committed some mistake somewhere. So this is coming as 13.53. So this way you can find. So as you can see, we calculate the errors for mean absolute deviation using the moving averages of 10. We found the mean absolute deviation, we found the mean squared errors, we found the mean absolute percentage error, so on and so forth, for both 20 periods as well as for 10 periods. Now let's talk about the trend analysis. In such cases where the data reveals trend, let us examine two ways of forecasting the future demand. Either it, as we did for moving average, for trends also we can find the first 10, 20 or whatever period you want to average out, or we can follow the linear regression method, wherein what you are doing, you are using again this equation of A plus Bx to forecast the demand for the next time horizon, where is X is the time. Or we can adopt exponential smoothing method to adjust for the trend. So we have already taken the moving average. So now let's discuss about the linear regression. The main forecasting idea is to fit a line that has a slope to capture the trend in the data. So linear regression method can be used when the trend is present and it can be t is equal to, or this can be equal to, forecast is equal to A plus B t. This is F. So we had a discussion about linear regression in the last 2 days, so I'll not again go for this. Now let's come back to seasonality. We initiated the discussions about seasonality. So how to address the seasonality in the data? First thing that you have to do, you have to recognize the seasonality, calculate the seasonal factors in case you see. Now here you see, these are the 4 seasons for which you have the data for visitors to a national park in thousands. As you can see, in fall it is 16, in winter it was 7, then in spring it rose to 12, and in summer it was the maximum. So yeah, it shows a very clear seasonality in the data. It shows a very clear seasonality in the data. So we need to find the seasonal factors. So how you go about finding the seasonal factors? Let's read it and we'll attempt one problem to do that. So seasonality corresponds to a pattern in the data that repeats at regular interval. So multiplicative seasonal factors, which is C subscript I or C1, C2, C3, and so this way. When you have a seasonality factor of 1.25, it implies that the value that you have found using the moving average or any averaging method has to be multiplied by 1.25 to get the forecast for that particular time or this particular season. And in case it is 0.75, it has to be reduced by multiplying it by 0.7. That is, it is 25% lower than the baseline or the average that you have found. And this is very significant in the retail industry. So this is the way how you find the seasonality indices. Step 1 shall be the sample mean. Then compute the sample mean of the entire data set. Second step shall be seasonal average. Average the observations for the n-like periods in the data. For example, average of all summers, all winters, etc. Third thing that we have to do, we have to divide the averages from step 2 by the sample mean. So this results in an n number of values, and these total n number of values shall add up to n seasonal factors, and n seasonal, then we deseasonalize the data. Better than be reading this, let's solve a problem or take up a problem to find this. Let me take up a problem. Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely visible.
Perfect, perfect. So I have the data about an airline load, about an airlines company. And I'm so sorry, I erased this. So I have a data about an airline industry for 3, 6, 11 periods data that I have from 2003 to 2013 for different months, as you see. Now I want to know, and as you can very clearly see that it is following some kind of seasonality. In January, the strength is less, and it picks up, it becomes maximum in June and July, that is the summer season, and then again it starts reducing to fall again, minimum in the month of January and Feb. And it is, as you can see, it is also showing some kind of increasing trend. It is increasing. The strength is increasing, but along with that, the seasonality factor is also there. So let's pick up this. So first step, as we read, was you need to find the sample mean. So this is the average of this complete data. This is the average of this complete data. This is average. This is the average of this complete data. Okay, I can reduce the number of, yeah. So this is the sample mean. The second step was that you wanted to know the mean of each season. So the mean of each season was found by averaging the data for all the time horizons. So here you see it has again come as the same, and simply you drag it for all the time horizons and you'll get the same values. Okay. The third step was that you had to divide the seasonality. You had to find the seasonality indices for the different seasonality indices for the different periods or different seasons. So how you find the seasonality index? You divide it by so you got the same value. Now if you see, if I drag it, I'm getting different values, and somewhere it is not even saying what value it is coming. So since for each thing I need to divide it with the same value which is given in E20, which is given in E20. So that is the reason I need to freeze E20 for each division or as the denominator for each numerator. So what I do, I freeze it. So how I freeze it? I make use of the symbol that is known as dollar. So I have freeze this. Now here you see the value remains the same, but if I you've got the same values again because each mean was divided by the same value of 79.4. So you had to freeze the denominator, and this is the way how you freeze the denominator. Now we shall be trying to find the deseasonalized demand. So how you find the deseasonalized demand? How you find the deseasonalized demand? You will be dividing each with the seasonality index that you have got. So for January, what I'm going to do, I'm going to divide the January value with the so first I need to, so this comes. So first what I can do, I had done it somewhere. Yeah. Now those the values are already I've calculated by me. It's not there. Yeah. So here you got the deseasonalized demand by divided by the seasonal factor. So you got the seasonal deseasonalized demand. I can reduce the number of zeros or number of decimals in this. Now similarly, I can do it for the other values in the same season, but there is some problem. Why? Because this factor is remaining the same, only the numerator is changing, but the denominator is kept the same. So what I do, I freeze the denominator. So what I'm doing, I am freezing the denominator. And if you see, this has been done by freezing the denominator. Yeah. You have freeze the denominator in this manner. I had shown you, we found the seasonality averages. We found the seasonal average. I believe all of you must have understood that how I found the seasonal averages. Then I found the seasonal factors, dividing the averages from the step 2 by the sample means. And then we found the deseasonalized values, wherein you have removed the seasonality. Now what you have to do, let's say, now using this deseasonalized demand, you make the graph. You make the graph, you make the curve. And then when you extrapolate it for the next planning horizon, you are able to forecast for the next planning horizon. And then whatever value you get, you can use moving average, you can use linear regression, you can use any tool. And then when you find that value, you multiply it with the seasonality index to actually forecast for the next period. So this is the way how you go about it. Now, we also may make use of a model that is known as an ARIMA model. I'll just give you a brief overview about that. It is known as auto-regressive integrated moving average. And essentially, it's a prediction model used for time series, whereas time series is a collection of observations of a well-defined data items, which we are obtaining through repeated measurements over time, through analysis, through forecasting. Some examples are given. So this is a brief introduction about the ARIMA model. So the main assumption about ARIMA model is it has to be univariate. It works only on a single variation. When you have a single variable, it doesn't work on more than one. So that is a major drawback. So let's come to the next topic for today's discussion. I'll just have a glass of water and then we can start. Okay. So what do you know by decision analysis? Decision analysis essentially is when you have lots of data. When you are aware about, you have predicted something about the future, when you have predicted the expected returns about the future for different decisions that a manager can take. So in that case, you have to take a call about which decision the manager has to. You have already identified the expected returns, the expected profits for different decisions that can be taken. But in decision analysis, you have to you have to take a call about the single decision the manager has to take out of all these expected decisions or all these probabilistic decisions or the calculated decisions that you have with the different returns in terms of monetary terms, in terms of some other units. So you have to take a call about it. So we make use of quantitative methods like which is a set of tools for operations manager. When the data is small and you have to predict for a smaller time horizon, we make use of simplistic decision-making techniques like moving averages or simple averages, Hurwitz criteria, Laplace criteria, minimax, maximax. I will be discussing some of them. But the main aim for today's discussion is decision trees. So I'll come back to the decision tree. And normally we make use of decision trees when you are taking sequential decisions. That is, you took one decision today. Now, that particular decision has different states of nature. So your decision will be impacted by different states of nature. Let's say this will give you an expected monetary value of x1. This will give you an expected value for x2. So if x1 is greater than x2, in that case, you will be taking the decision to follow this route. If x1 is less than x2, then in that case, you will be taking the decision to follow this route. Now, let's say you follow this route. In case you follow this route, further, you have to take another decision with different states of nature. So this becomes a sequential decision making. And it can again move further. I'll be taking one example. Let's say you want to go out. That examples I will be taking, you want to go out. So either the season can be sunny, it can be humid, it can be rainy or anything. If it is sunny, you can take some expected outcomes might be there. Similarly, let's say for this particular, there will be some expected outcome. So this becomes something like a tree. With this as the, if I turn it by 90 degrees, it becomes a tree. So this way, we have to take a logical decision using the decision trees. So let's discuss about it. And as you know, future is uncertain. So for each decision, there shall be some uncertainty, some probability associated with the future state of nature. For example, for first decision, now this has, let's say, the probability of 6, this has a probability of 0.4. So 60% probability of happening of this, 40% probability of happening of this. So if you take this logic, you might have to take another decision with some different probabilities. So this manner it goes. So in the first instance, when you don't have any probability, you're not able to assign the probability to the future occurrence. So that is known as the probability decision making under a state of uncertainty. And when you are able to assign the probability to the future occurrence, we call it as decision making under a state of risk. So states of nature are the events that might happen in the future. Some examples can high or low demand, high economy, low economy, good economy, bad economy, or the customer base might shift. Customer might not like your product, customer might like your product. The market growth might be there, market growth might not be there, or market growth might fall. So all these are the different states of nature which we will be checking out. So as you can see in the slides, there is a payoff table which specify if I take the decision 1. So these are internal things. You have to take this decision. And these are the states of nature which are external. These are external. You don't have any control over it. But predicting the future states of if I take decision 1 and the state of nature is A, my payoff shall be 1A. Similarly, if you take the decision 2 and your state of nature, so this is going to be a payoff, or it can be a profit, it can be a loss, it can be a gain, or it can be the return, or whatever value that you want to give it. So decision making under criteria of uncertainty, we can have maximax decision, we can have maximum decision, you can have minimax regret decision, you can have Hurwitz criteria. So first pick up the maximax decision, where you choose the decision with the maximum of the maximum payoffs. In the maximum, what you are doing, you are choosing the decision with the maximum of the minimum payoffs. So what you do, let's say this is your these are the 3 decisions, and these are the 3 expected states of nature. So for each decision, you identify the maximum payoff, maximum 1, max 2, and max 3, and then you choose the maximum out of these 3 maximums. In this, what you do, you find the minimum. And then you try to choose the max out of these 3 minimums. The maximum out of these 3 minimums shall be your decision. In the minimax regret, what you do, you try to find the maximum payoff in this grid. The maximum payoff in this grid. And then let's say if this is the particular state of nature, this is the particular state of nature, and this is the maximum payoff under this state of nature. And if you don't take this decision, what's going to be your regret if you take this decision, and what's going to be your regret if you take this decision? Similarly, for this particular state of nature, let's say this is the maximum payoff. If you don't take the decision 1 in case of the state of nature B, what's going to be your regret? What's going to be your regret? So you prepare the regret table, and then you first find the maximum regret, and then you try to minimize the regret or minimize your losses. Then there is a Hurwitz criteria, wherein you choose the decision in which decision payoffs are weighted by a coefficient of optimism, that is alpha. Now this particular alpha has a value from 0 to 1, that is completely pessimistic to completely optimistic. So this alpha is taken up, wherein the decision maker decides that this particular state of nature is having this probability of occurrence. So that is your Hurwitz criteria, equal likelihood when whatever the number of different states of nature have equal likelihood of occurrence. So let's take up an example. So in this case, the maximax shall be the first one, the maximax. So you have taken the maximum out of these. So here you can see the maximum out of each decision has been chosen, and then you pick the maximax, the maximum out of the maximums. In the maximum, you have chosen the minimum. So this is the minimum in this decision, this is the minimum, and this is same. So this is minimum. And you try to maximize your, so this is also known as the pessimism criteria. This is known as the optimism criteria. This is known as the pessimism criteria. Then the minimax regret. So if I check out this grid again, the maximum payoff out of this grid is this one, and the maximum payoff for this particular state of nature is this. So if I don't take a choice, make a choice of this, when the competitive relations are poor, if I don't take a choice of or decision of expansion, my loss in this case shall be and in this case, my loss shall be what I have done. I have subtracted the maximum payoff from rest. Similarly, this is the maximum payoff in case the foreign conditions are good. So again, I prepare the regret table as this is. So maximum of these regrets, in this case, regret is maximum here. In the second case, the regret is maximum in this case, and in the maximum in this case. So you want to minimize your regret. So this is going to be your choice. Hurwitz criteria, wherein probability of occurrence is given to you. Equal likelihood. When you are able to assign some probabilities, this is the expected value that you choose. What is expected value for perfect information? To gather this information about the expected payoffs and the percentages or the probabilities, you have to pay some money. There are lots of companies which have data, and when you are purchasing that data, so you want to know what is the maximum value that you are ready to pay or to purchase that data. So let's say what is the, it says 70% of the time the foreign conditions are good and 30% of the time the foreign competitive conditions are poor. So using that, we got the decision as status quo here. So in case of good foreign competitive conditions, the maximum payoff is 1.3 million. And in case of poor foreign competitive conditions, the maximum payoff is 0.5 million. So the expected value, when you have the perfect information that if it's whether it's going to be good foreign competitive conditions or whether it's going to be poor foreign conditions. So in that case, when the data is there with you to predict the future with surety, this is the maximum payoff in that case. But if you look at this case, what was the value? So this shall be the maximum amount that you are ready to pay for purchasing the information from an external source. So coming back for the topic of our discussion, that is decision trees. It's a decision support tool that uses a tree-like graph or a model of decisions and their possible consequences, including chance events, outcomes, resources, so on and so forth. We make use of a square node, we make use of a circular node, and we make use of some arcs. So let me draw the decision tree for this particular problem. A company is considering two alternatives to expand or purchase the land. So let's say this is the first decision the company has to take: to expand or to sell off, purchase. Okay, it's the first two decisions the company has to take. Now this each is having future outcomes: market growth, good market growth, and it can have poor market growth. And then we are considering only a 10-year planning horizon. First decision facing the company is whether to expand or buy the land. The cost of ventures are And in this case, this is this much. This is 2 million and that is 8 million. If we expand, either the market will grow. Why this is happening? If we expand, either the market will grow or the market will not grow. The probability of growth is 60% and here the probability of growth is 40%. If the plant is expanded and the good market growth is there, so the payoff is also given to you, which is some amount. And if the no market growth is there, then again some value is given to you. If the decision to purchase the land is taken, then two states of nature can be there within a period of 3 years. Market growth with a probability of 0.6 or no market growth with a probability of 0.4. If we purchase the land and market growth is there, then either we can expand or sell off the land for dollars 4,50,000, or if we go for expansion at a cost of 8 lakhs, then post expansion, whether there is a probability of 0.8 for further market growth with payment of 3 million or no market growth with probability of 0.2 and a payoff of 7 lakhs. If post purchase of land, no market growth is there, then we have to take a decision, either build a warehouse or sell off the land for dollars 2,10,000. If we build a warehouse at a cost of this, so this is the problem that we have to sort out. So I can draw it for you in case you want. Just a second. So this way I can draw it. As you can see, purchase the land, expansion, the amount is given to you. Expansion, the money is given, purchasing the land. So if when you go for expansion, there can be two states of nature, the market grows or the market doesn't grow. If the market growth, this is going to be the expected earning. If the market growth is not there, this is going to be the expected earning, which is given in the problem. As you can see, 0.6 and 0.4. If the market, no market growth is here, this is going to be the expected earning. If you go for purchasing the land, then there can be another two options, market growth or no market growth. And the probability is already given of 0.6 and 0.4, which is very much there. So what you can do, if the market growth is there and you keep the land for 3 years, you have to again take a decision for expansion or selling of the land. So if you go for expansion, then two states of nature can happen, market growth and no market growth, and you sell off the land, so you don't need any other decision. If you keep the land and no market growth is there, then either you can build the warehouse or you can sell off the land. Build the warehouse, again, these two decisions are, or these two states of nature are supposed to be checked with some earnings. So now I want to know what decision should I take today, which is happening like 10 years down the line. So this is the decision tree that we have built. So what we do, we try to first identify the expected monetary value at 2, then 6, and so on. So at 2, this is going to be Similarly, at this case, this is going to be similarly here. So you'll get the value somewhere. So now what I'm going to do, at this point, I will try to decide, then whatever value I get, I will be subtracting this with, because this amount I have used for purchasing the land. So then I'm going to do the comparison between this value and the expected monetary value at 6, and that shall be my decision at the decision node 4. Similarly, this shall be subtracted from, so 6 lakhs shall be subtracted from this expected monetary value at 7 to find a amount, and that will be compared with this to take a logical decision at node 5. In the similar manner, we go back, we start from the rightmost point and move towards the left. So here you can see this is the expected monetary value at 6, this is the expected monetary value at 7, and this is the expected monetary value at 2. So this subtracted with this is the value 1,074 million is the, if you subtract 8 lakhs from this, this comes as 1.74 million. So you have done a comparison. So at decision node 4, you have taken a decision to go for expansion. Similarly, in this case, when you subtract from 1.3 million, you subtract 6 lakhs, this comes as 7 lakhs 90,000. Do a comparison for 2 lakh 10,000. So you will be taking this decision. Now further again, 7 lakhs 90,000 multiplied by 0.4 and 1.7 million multiplied by 0.6, you get this value. And here 2 million multiplied by 0.6 and 2,25,000 into 0.4, you get this value. From this value, you subtract this 8 lakhs, and from 1.36 million, you subtract the value of the land, and you get that this will be your decision at the node 1. Purchase the land. Then further, if the market growth is there, then you take a decision for expansion. If no market growth is there, then you take a decision for building a warehouse. So your decision shall be purchase the land. After 3 years, see if market growth is there, you go for expansion. And if no market growth is there, then you go for building a warehouse. So this is the way how you solve the decision trees. Here you can see. Though this is the about decision tree, that's the scientific analysis of decision making, visual aids to structure, solve. Now, the major advantage of decision tree is there. If you check out the problem statement, it is coming in more than 2 pages. But when you draw it, it's on a single page. So it's become easy for the manager to read the data in a single page. So solve sequential decision problems, beneficial when the complexity of the problem is growing. It's useful for operational decision making, and it encourages clear thinking and planning. So it has some limitations like local optimal solutions. It doesn't give you global optimal solutions. Possibility of duplication with the same subtree or different paths. And for sure, possibility of spurious relationships. Predicting the future, it's not very easy. You have identified some probabilities, but they might change. So there's always some error component associated with this. So how to go about it? So there are certain algorithms which are there: CART, CHAT, Quest, ID3, C 4.5, and Mars. We're going to just go through, have an overview about CART and CHAT. So CART is classification and regression tree. So classification and regression tree, or CART, is a term introduced by Leo Bremen to refer to regression tree algorithms that can be used for classification or regression predictive modeling problems. Again, as I said, regression helps you in a very good manner for prediction of the future. So in CART, we make use of a Gini index. Now, Gini index is a measure which measures the impurity in the node. It varies between 0 and 1 minus 1 upon n, where n is the number of categories in a dependent variable. So I'll explain it with help of an example. So in this, the process is first you prepare the rules based on variable values. You select and get the best split to differentiate observations based on the dependent variables. And once you have identified the rule, you split the nodes into two. The same process is applied to each child node. Now, what is a child node? That is a recursive procedure. That's because a decision tree. So each node has got some decisions. So you have a first decision that you are taking, then it has got some childs, then further that the child of that node. So this, in this way it goes. So what you are doing at the end, the splitting shall stop when CART detects no further gain can be made, or you have already split the data as much as possible and it cannot be taken any further. So this is the flowchart for the CART algorithm. Begin for each tree, choose the training data subset. If you stop, if the condition holds that each node is fulfilled, if it is fulfilled, then calculate the predictive error. If it is not fulfilled, you build the next split and then again go back. Then again the stop condition is saying that it is completed. Then you calculate the prediction error if it is not completed. So this way you go on. How you build the next split? Choose the variable subsets. For each variable, identify the sample data sorted by the variables, different variables. Then compute the Gini index at each split and choose the best split. So this way you build the split. How it is done? Let's take up an example. For 7 days in a week, so these are the 5 variables which are needed to be considered for going out for a ride. So there are outlook, which can be sunny, it can be overcast, or it can be rainy. The second variable is temperature. It can be hot, it can be mild, or it can be cool. The third variable is humidity, which is high or normal or low. We have taken only 2 parameters, that is high and normal. Windy, it can be weak or you can have strong winds. And the decision that you have to take whether to venture out or no is yes or no. So you have like 14 days data that you have, 2 weeks data that you have. Now you have to take a logical decision on the basis of the data using the CART algorithm. So let's build the tree. So first variable is the outlook. So on the basis of the outlook, you prepare the Gini index. So sunny, if you read the 14 parameters, sunny is appearing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. With the decision no 1, 2, 3 times, and the decision yes 2 times. Similarly, overcast is appearing 1, 2, 3, 4 times, with the decision yes 1, 2, 3 and 4 times. All 4 times the decision is yes, you are venturing out. And the third one is rainy, which is appearing 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And the decision to venture out again is yes or no 3 times and no is 2. So number of instances total are 5, 4, and 5. So total you have 14 in these instances. So Gini outlook for sunny shall be 1 minus 2 upon 5 minus 3 upon 5 whole square, which is the equation that I had shown you here. So Gini index for outlook sunny is 0.48. For overcast, it is 0. And for rain, it is 0.48. Then we will calculate the weighted sum of Gini indices for the outlook feature, which is calculated by the total. It is 14. Total it is 14. So 5 times sunny is appearing, 4 times forecast is appearing, and 5 times rain is appearing. So this way you find the Gini index of 0.342. Similarly, for temperature, you have found the Gini index of 0.439. For humidity, the Gini index of 0.367. And for wind, the Gini index for 0.42 and 8. Now we have to take a decision. So Gini indices have been identified. Now if you check this out, the Gini index of outlook is the minimum. So this is going to be the first feature we are going to look for because the cost is lowest. So first pick up the outlook variable, which has got 3 parameters: sunny, overcast, and rain, with sunny appearing 5 times, overcast appearing 4 times, and rain appearing 5 times again, with different temperatures, humidity, wind, and decisions. Different temperatures, humidity, wind, and decisions for all the 3 outlook. So sub data in the overcast leaf has only one yes variable. So the overcast leaf is over. So you don't need to take any decision. If it's overcast, it's yes. For sunny, the decision is yes as well as no. And for rain also, the decision is yes or no, depending on the situation. So what we do, so the sub data for sunny outlook shall be sunny 5 times, and the first going to pick up the sub database for sunny outlook, which is there. This is the 5 cross 5 6 matrix that you have taken for the sunny outlook, with temperature, humidity, and wind, and the different decisions that you can take. So first we are going to solve it for the first decision if the outlook is sunny. So in this case, you can see in case of first is sunny, decision is taken, it is sunny. Then temperature can be hot or mild or cool. So decisions again, so there can be 3 decisions, 3 temperatures: hot, cool, and mild, with yes or no identified. Again, you find the Gini index for temperature when it is sunny, for humidity, and for wind when it is sunny. So for sunny index, the Gini indices for sunny outlook, the Gini indices have been identified. Similarly, for humidity, that is the first index, which is the minimum here, 0. So for humidity, the index is high or normal, high humidity or normal individual. 2 cases are there. In the similar manner, so outlook, sunny, humidity, high, and normal. So this is a decision. One branch is made. Overcast, it is already yes. Similarly, for rain also you can make the same process. You see, if it is outlook is rainy, then for wind, which is got the minimum, so this is going to be a decision. If it is rainy, you're going to identify as on the basis of the wind. So wind can be weak or strong. If it is weak, you take yes. If it is strong, it is no. If humidity is high, it is no. And so if it is sunny, you will be taking the decision on the basis of humidity. If it is windy, you will be taking the decision. If it is raining, you will be taking the decision on the basis of the wind. If it is sunny, take the decision on the basis of humidity. If it is rainy, you take the decision on the basis of wind, and if it is overcast, the decision is always yes. So we'll stop at this point. So I'll just give you an introduction about CADE, that is Chi-Square Automatic Interaction Detector, and it was a technique created by Gordon V. Cass in 1980, and it's a tool used to discover the relationship between variables, and it builds on the predictive model. So far, whatever we have discussed today in the time series and decision making, it is for prediction of the data that you have. You have lots of data, so on the basis of that data, you have to predict the future, or try to help determine how variables best merge to explain the outcomes in the given dependent variable. So I'll stop at this point. Any questions, anybody?
1 minute. Mic on कर दो आपका.
Hello.
ठीक. Hello. Any questions regarding this session? You can ask. Any questions?
Okay, no questions. So thanks a lot. Thanks for inviting me for the session. It was a good session. I enjoyed myself. I don't know about the audience, but there were so many things I believe I could have delivered in more, specifically using the Excel sheet. There was, I think my Excel sheet got hung up. That is the reason I couldn't explain it in a better manner. I wanted to explain about the mean at the moving averages. Then I wanted to show how the linear trend line is made, but we couldn't manage it today. So we'll try if it can be done the next time. Okay, thank you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for very good session. Thank you.